Finish soon, I promise. In fact, I think for a long time, MSMA, I don't think even mentioned in interviews or public her father's name in the early days. I don't think she even mentioned it. It's only much later that she started saying her father was Subramanian. Now, Himmal Vasanta Kumari, often clubbed with Brinda, with Patama and MS, actually came later. If there are contemporaries, it should be Brinda, MS and Patama in terms of age. But since Brinda is never associated with the main stage, she's moved away and it is Patama, MS, MLB, which is also interesting. She's not the popular category and therefore she was moved. Now Vasanta Kumari, by the time Vasanta Kumari really came up, the stage had been set by MS. One has to say that before you speak about Vasanta Kumari. Vasanta Kumari also comes from a Devadasi background, but the stage of the social discourse of the establishment of challenging these men, both by Patama in a different way and by MS, had already set the stage up for her. And therefore, when we speak about MLV, we have to state this and not forget this. And MLV also came with a kind of a musical backing from a superstar. I mean, GNB was no ordinary superstar. He was just the superstar. Okay? And she came as the Varisi, the descendant who held that star and gave, shall we say, a feminine voice to that school. Right? And this definitely gave her, shall we say, a far easier platform to push from than what MS ever faced or Patama ever faced, without doubt. So you have Vasanta Kumari coming here, and Vasanta Kumari's music has this, it has this gap, this feature of just being, I don't care attitude, I'm just going to try this. I don't care. And that is a very GNB-esque kind of a sound, right? And for the first time, you had a woman displaying that. So whatever said and done, Patama and MS, as they came earlier, they came in a different era, there were certain guards that they always had that were up in order to get the acceptance that they wanted. See, ultimately, an artist wants to be heard. An artist wants to be said, you're wonderful. That's the dream of an artist. And so you negotiate a lot of things. We all do it. We all do it many times subconsciously without even realizing that you're negotiating so many things for that acceptance. So, but when Vasanta Kumari came, she came from a school that was this flowing, fast, kind of almost like a David Gower cover drive kind of school. If those who know cricket and have seen David Gower play, they know what I'm talking about. And so her music really kind of took a very different position in the year to the music that MS took or Patama took. And therefore she was able to really pave a way in a way that these two could not, because also the time frame was earlier. Now, I mean, the word that a friend of mine said is she was adventurous. I think that's probably really puts it. She was extremely adventurous. She did not bother about risks. That's the other thing, Women don't take risks. She challenged that notion directly. She took risks every moment she was on stage. So there is another idea of men being completely challenged by Vasanta Kumari. When she says, I take all the risks and I don't know whether my next Sangati is going to fall right or wrong. So what? Let it fall wrong. I hear this saying said even today, by the way. Don't think it's an old notion. Among my colleagues, I'm even told now that that's ladies Sangeetam, they don't take risks. Even today in 2019, it's being told. They are far safer. Men are the ones who will take risks. Now, it's a psychological stigma that is attached to the music of women and given as a credit to the music of men. Vasanta Kumari said, go to hell to that. So, and at a time period when, in the 1950s and 60s. So just imagine what she achieved. Of course, she was also very well known because of also her mother and her for Punutadasa Devaranama. And Lalitangi herself did a lot for Devaranamas. And Vasanta Kumari definitely continued singing a lot of Devaranamas. A lot of Dasat Padas. Of course, Baro Krishna, not tuned by Govindarao, is is one of her most famous renditions. And I want to say one thing that, when all of us try and learn from these tapes, after learning, don't ever go back and listen to that tape of them singing. Because then you'll know what a bad job you have done of it. So I learned Vara Krishna from Sangeeta Shivakumar. My wife, a musician who comes from that school, I make sure that I don't listen to her sing again. Because there is in that, and she comes from the same tradition, so I know what I'm talking about, is there is this definition and sharpness of everything that falls. There is no sense of liquidity anywhere. So, every Sangeet, I can't sing it like, Baro Krishna, Krishna, ya. Now, this Sangati is not easy to sing. But every time sing it with that finesse, speed, almost crackle, only that school had. Only that school has. Because it comes in the training. And Vasanthi Kumari did it like for Ragam, for anything she sang, she would just sing that way. So, these are all very, very aesthetic feminist adventures, which are also important in discussing how aesthetic notions were being challenged by these women. So much can be said, so I'm going to go on. But in spite of all this, the truth of the matter is that the Carnatic music world is a male chauvinistic upper caste world. There's an undeniability to this, and this is a fact. The fact is that even when these great musicians were at their best, most men would not accompany them. This is the truth. Palghat Maniyar accompanied Pattama towards the end of his life and Vasanthi Kumari towards the end of his life. But otherwise, none of these great mridangams or violin maestros ever accompanied these women. This is the truth. The fact is it was considered lower to be sitting on stage on the side of a woman. And somehow this has been just accepted. This has been accepted as somehow fine, not a problem. It's been accepted by everybody, the men, the organizer. There's no organizer I've heard who has said, if a mridangist says, I only play for women, I will not call him this. I've not heard any organizer say that. In my opinion, in 2019 we don't do it. Forget about 1970. In 2019 we don't do it. It's not a choice of artists. It's a gender choice. Very clearly gender choice. So, the fact is that in spite of all these women have achieved, there is still a great amount of aesthetic stigma. Now, some of the excuses given by mridangists and excuses given by people who are saying why they prefer male music is, they will say that females' music is not robust enough. No, they will say females' music is not strong enough. Accompanists will say the attention goes too much for the women if I play for women. These are all things that are actually told. Okay, the focus is more on the women, which they are hinting is on the physicality of the women, which they are saying actually. They are not talking about music, they are hinting at the fact is because there's a woman sitting in between, I am not noticed. Okay, and this is what they are actually saying. And then they will, there are 100 excuses given, and I'll be happy to openly battle every one of them. No problem. So you can throw all the excuses at me. Shruti, fraud. Because when they played for 5.5 Chitra Veena, they have no problem. When they played for Mali, they had no problem. When they played for Ramani with a higher flute, they had no problem. So where is 5.5 a problem? Suddenly that disappears when you play for men. So these are realities. So I'm just saying that in spite of all this is also truth in all this actually existing. You cannot run away from these truths. Then you also have male vocalists who will advise their younger colleagues who accompany them to say, stop playing for women, I'll call you more for concerts. What do these young violinists and mridangists do? So also playing for famous, well-respected men is considered the stepping stone for you to become accepted as a serious musician. So it is fine if you accompany women until the point where you need to make the jump. And then you make this proclamation that I won't play for women anymore. As if it's the most important decision you've taken, make it public too. And nobody seems bothered by all this. None of us seem bothered by all this. We'll talk about all feminism and liberal rights outside the world of Carnatic music. But within the world of Carnatic music, nobody is asking these questions. It's happening till today. And I'm really saying, you can ask a question, aren't there more women singing than men? Absolutely true. So that's the whole interesting thing, right? Discriminative practice or discrimination is not got to do with numbers. It has got to the power of the holding community. That is more important. Just because you have more numbers of women doesn't mean the women are more powerful in the ecosystem of the music. Tell me how many secretaries and presidents of the sabhas across India are men? I actually know probably 1 or 2 maximum. They're all men who are holding all these positions. Let's think about it. It's always been men. So we have to think of all this as also being very, very existent today. Another thing, whenever next generation appears, my generation, there's a next generation, now there's a next generation. With all due respect to the great Mridangam Vidwans, they'll be waiting to see who's the next male catch. Okay? T.M. Krishna has now gone up. Okay? He's not interested in me anymore, as far as they are concerned. Now, next generation, I want somebody I can pick up, who I can accompany a lot. Because they want to continue their profession. Right? Then after that, there's another next generation. Right? But it's only men. So what happens because of this, please remember, is that the men get promoted, men get better slots, men get evening concert in a jiffy. The women have to wait and struggle against this great amount of strength and publicity that this young male is getting only because he is male. No other reason. So a younger girl of the same age group with the same talent will be singing with people of her peers who will accompany her. The same boy will have the greatest Mridangam Vidwans, the greatest violin Vidwans saying, play for this boy sings so well, I play for him. So you're giving almost an Agmark certificate for the boy. How unjust is this? Even within that little world of Carnatic music, we're not even gone beyond it. Right? It's still working. This is still happening today. So when we discuss all this, we have to think about these many aspects, the historicity of the sound, the historicity of the aesthetics, the women and how much they've contributed to the idea of sound, and how almost systematically and steadily that has been moved to the margins. It's been moved to the margins. It's been either called devotional stuff or called very exclusive things. So I have a question that is a very dangerous question for a man to ask, but it's still a question that I raised and I've been raising and I still don't know the answer. Is there a voice of a woman in Carnatic music? Is a question that I'm unable to understand. Because the environment is still such that the women have to find a way to find acceptance among this male group. So a lot of it is directed in trying to find ways of maneuvering and subverting that. Where is that ability to say, go to hell with that, I will sing. Much easier for a man to do. So much easier for a man to do. So much easier for me to do. Simply because I'm a man. No other reason. So we have to think about all these things because I think we've aesthetically lost a lot. We've aesthetically not discovered something. And because when we talk about multiple voices in an art form, it is not just the voice we're talking about. We're talking about personalities, we're talking about sexualities, we're talking about physicalities, we're talking about emotional bandwidths, we're talking about so many different things that are diverse in the multiple genders. I am not even going to go to talk about the trans community, as I don't think there's been a trans musician at all in Carnatic music. I'm sure there were many who were queer, but I don't think the environment is conducive for them to come and say, I'm gay. Has ever been, is not even today. So I have to, without speaking about that, I can't end this conversation. Because at a time when we are talking about, the rights of the queer community, the rights of the transgender community, of homosexuals, of gays, of lesbians, we can't even have this conversation in the Carnatic world. You can't even have this conversation. So, I think there is a lot to think about, aesthetically, socially, and politically, about the caste and the gender structures, and our senses of sexuality and sensuality that have, in a way, been completely moved, boxed, and figured in a certain format that every one of us are playing to, irrespective of what gender you are. We're all playing to. I mean, for example, if you take one male, this very interesting example is Krishna. I think he did something very interesting. He In his music, he challenged the notion of femininity and masculinity quite interestingly. If you listen to Ramnath Krishan sing, you can't. There is this fluidity of gender that happens in his tone, in his accent, in the way he sang, which is very, very interesting for us to think about also, right? So these are the questions that I also need to ask myself, because these notions are about the multiple genders and also within each gender. And how does one find more fluidity in the expression of art, that it need not conform to any one sense of gender, one sense of sexuality or sensuality, and is allowed to freely express, then the art form could evolve more sonic dimensions. We have already lost a lot, especially among the women. Thank you, rather, especially from the women. Thank you very much.